Alrighty, take two. So for those kids that logged in at 10 o'clock and actually participated with a live version of this, I just want to say thank you because that shows us right there how much that you really care and that you're dedicated to your own successes. So thank you so much. But as I told you earlier in class, we are learning together, and I did not record this session, so I am so sorry. I'm just going to make a screencastify just like we've been doing in the past. And if you kiddos choose to, if we decide we want to go forward trying to do the live sessions, we can try it again later. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and go through this and the quick review. Okay. The last 2 weeks, we've been talking about organisms and ecosystems and how those organisms survive in their habitats. And so we're just going to take a few minutes to review. And then at the end of this review, Screencastify, you're going to have a couple of different review options, some games that you can do on your own. And then know that the third assignment that we post this week, which it will be a Google form, in the form of like a quiz, just to test your knowledge to make sure that you are participating and that you're retaining the information that we're presenting to you. Okay. Alrighty, so the first thing that we looked at, this was about 2 weeks ago when we started this, is when we talked about the levels of organization within the biosphere. Remember the biosphere, it was the largest classification of life on Earth. Okay, bio meaning life and sphere meaning zone. So the sphere on Earth where all life exists. Okay, on this particular slide that you're looking at, instead of going from largest to smallest, it's actually organized from smallest to largest. Okay. So let's start at the top and we'll work our way through. Remember, an individual is one. Okay, so this would be an organism. When you get a group of the same organism in an area, okay, meaning the same species, you have a population. So instead of having one bunny, we have a whole family of bunnies. That's a population. Okay, humans. Okay, we make up a population. From population, you move to the community. And you got to remember that your community is only comprised or only made of the biotic factors. And biotic meaning living. So now we're talking all the different animals and all the different plants in a particular area, okay, that are adaptive for a particular environment. From community, we move up a level and we go to the ecosystem. And now you're talking about a larger area, and now it's comprised of biotic and abiotic factors. So it's simply instead of just referring to the plants and animals, now you're thinking about the temperature of the area, the amount of rain in the area, the amount of oxygen or carbon dioxide, however you want to think about it, all those components that work together to sustain life. And from the ecosystem, you go up to a biome, which is just a very large ecosystem. So we learned last week things like the desert or the tundra, the Arctic, the rainforest. Those were examples of biomes because you have particular plants and animals that are adapted for each of those areas. And then the largest one would be your biosphere. Okay. Practice question. And if you want to pause and check your understanding of this, you sure can. But the question here says, which of these is an example, or which of these is an example of your population? So 3, 2, 1. Let's see how you did in your thinking. The correct answer here would be C. Okay, all the panda bears, that would make up a population because they're a group of the same species. If you're looking at picture A, you have the koala bear, the panda bear, the tree, the bamboo. This would be more of an example of a community because it's a group of biotic factors in the same area. B is simply an example of an individual or an organism because it's just one panda bear. All right, now let's move on and recap what we talked about, biomes, okay? Again, this is just a quick review just to see if you got the big picture of what you're supposed to get. Okay, I love the picture that we put on the slide because it shows you a bunch of the different terrestrial biomes. Yeah, you have grasslands, you have rainforests, you have forests like deciduous forest. Let's see, I don't see a coniferous forest on there, but that's okay. All right, the main kind of biomes that we looked at last week were aquatic and terrestrial. Remember, aquatic was just a big fancy science word that means water, and terrestrial is just a big word that means land. Of your aquatic biomes, there are two main ones. You had freshwater and marine, which is just another word for ocean. And the difference between the two, your freshwater aquatic biomes would be like lakes, rivers, streams, ponds. Okay, those are the ones that do not contain salt or very, very, very small amount of salt. While your marine or your ocean biomes are the ones that contain large amounts of salt. And realize they're different because you're going to have different plants and different animals in each. An organism that lives in freshwater cannot live in saltwater. Okay, and vice versa. The only I guess loophole to this would be what an estuary is, because we did touch on that too last week. Estuaries are very special because they're basically a mixture of salt water and fresh water. So where where a stream or a river might dump into an ocean. And again, you're going to have very special organisms in that environment. Not everything will be able to live there. Okay, talking about your terrestrial biomes or your land biomes, we learned that biomes have a direct relationship to their latitude and their longitude. Okay, on the globe, as you move closer to the equator, okay, the closer you get to the equator, it gets what? I want you to pause this video if you need to, okay, to give yourself some think time. And I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide and so we can see the picture. Okay, so we've learned that the closer to the equator that you get, okay, either moving north to south or south to north. As you get closer to the equator, it gets warmer and it gets wetter. Okay, this is why we call it the tropical zone. Again, tropical rainforest. This is where you're going to find your rainforest. Okay, and as you move away from the equator, we have what we call the temperate zone. So we're talking to all this area up here. This is where you're going to have your deciduous forest, like your forests that have the trees that will drop their leaves in the winter. And then you have like your coniferous forests. Coniferous forests are going to be a little bit even farther away, like up here in Canada. Okay, or if you're down here on this part of the globe, you're talking down here, this would be a very coniferous type of forest, because those are the evergreens, again, adapted for that environment. And then you get to the very, very tip of the globe, either the North Pole or the South Pole. Those are your Arctic regions, okay, your polar zones. I do want you to realize that, again, as you move close to the equator, we said it gets warmer, but more importantly, it gets wetter, because as you move away from the equator, it gets drier, okay? A lot of kiddos tend to think that all deserts are hot and dry, and that's not true, okay? Up here in this Arctic zone, this is a desert, okay? This is a desert region, meaning that it's a very dry region, okay? This is where you find your tundras. Tundras are very they do have plant life up there, but mainly like it's going to be lichen and moss. Okay, not very many trees because of how dry it is. So not too many trees there. Okay, on this next one, this is just a little quiz on your behalf, just to see what you retained, what you remember. But you'll see there's 6 main land biomes. One is missing. Which one's missing? Okay. Again, we have this would be like your coniferous rainforest. That's what a taiga is. Then you have your deciduous forest. You have your grasslands. Some might be like a savanna grassland or like the grassland where we live. You have your deserts, your hot deserts, your cold deserts, and then you have your tundra. So which one's missing? Okay. 3, 2, 1. If you need to pause, feel free to pause this video. And let's see if you got it correct. Hopefully you said the rainforest. Yeah, because the rainforest was not on that previous slide. We learned last week that the rainforest biome was the one that has the most biodiversity, meaning it has the most forms of life. Actually, they say that the rainforest is so dense, they're still discovering plant life and animal life that they didn't even know were there. But we learned that there was a connection between the biodiversity of an ecosystem and the health of the ecosystem. Last week we learned, okay, you should be able to fill in the blank. Rainforest biome has the most biodiversity, therefore it is the most, and you could put in the word stable, you could put in the word healthy, you could put in the word sustainable, because all 3 of those words are synonyms. That's what sustainable means. Basically, if some sort of disruption were to come through an ecosystem, a fire, a flood, a disease, something like that, the rainforest biome would probably have the most success at rebuilding itself in succession because of the biodiversity, because of the amount of life that's there. That's what sustainability is. Okay. The last thing that we looked at last week was succession. So real quick, we're going to touch on the two kinds of succession. You had an activity last week where you were supposed to do a Venn diagram to compare and contrast the two. Most of you did very well on it. A few of you still struggled. So let's see if I can help you out real quick. Okay. The difference between the two, okay, is well, first off, let's talk about the word succession itself. Okay. Ecological succession just simply means the changes that take place in an ecosystem over time. Okay. Primary succession simply means it's an area where there is no life. Okay. For instance, after a volcanic eruption, like if you look at this picture here, this is where a volcano has erupted, the lava has cooled off, and now you're just left with a bunch of igneous rock. Well, what happens is pioneer species, typically what we call lichen and moss, will move into the area and they will slowly break that rock down into soil. Now, this is going to take many, many years for you to get enough soil that's able to sustain smaller plants. Okay. So the rocks will be broken down, and again, it'll repeat and repeat till you get layers of soil, and then you get smaller plants, things like grasses, flowers, which will draw in pollinators and herbivores, and then over time, those plants will start to change over into bigger plants, things like smaller trees and shrubs, and then eventually you'll be left with a climax community, a healthy community. Okay. Now, over here on this side, where we talk about secondary succession, again, this is a change that takes place. The only difference is in this ecosystem, there's already soil intact. Okay. There was already life there. So, a good example would be like in a forest where a forest fire comes and burns down the forest. Okay. Doesn't remove the soil, there's still soil there. The pioneer species that move in are going to be things like grasses and flowers. Okay. You don't need the moss or the lichen to break the rocks into soil because you already have soil. So this is why these pioneer species will be things like flowers and grass. Okay. And then again, the change will take place. It'll take a few years to go. Plants will grow and die, and then come back and die. And smaller plants, flowers will lead to shrubs, which will lead to a full blown climax community. But again, that takes time. Okay. Here's a good picture side by side where you can actually compare the two. Okay. So at the top, we have primary. Again, remember, this is going to be rock, things like volcanic eruptions, glaciers. As a glacier comes through a particular, comes down a mountainside and it's carving out. Okay. It's leaving, all it is a trail of rock. So over time, lichens and moss will break that rock into soil. You get small plants, which will eventually lead to a climax community. Okay. Again, here's secondary. You already have soil, so your pioneer species are going to be more like flowers and grass. Again, the similarity between the two, though, is that they are both changes over time and that their goal is to end with a healthy, stable environment. Okay, that was the end of this particular presentation. And I do want you to realize that what we're going to do on your Google Classroom is we're going to go back and we are going to post this slide. And basically, these are just some review games. You can choose either or. You can do both. It doesn't matter. These are just for practice for you, just to make sure you submit the content a little bit better. And then your grade for this week will actually come from the Google form. Okay, that has the practice questions on there. So take your time, read carefully, and do well. All right, see you next week, kids.